Good morning. We are now doing arthropod nervous system. So when you look at the arthropods, we know that they are extremely successful when you look at how many cover the entire planet, which means they gather information about their world very efficiently. They don't have a brain like we do. They're not big thinkers. They're not reading books. But they do have fusions of ganglia for a very elementary brain. They also have a dorsal nerve cord. Some of them have nerve rings. So it varies from one species to another, quite diverse. Aquatic creatures versus terrestrial creatures versus flyers that have to have really good coordination. So some of the ways that they get their information is from receptors along their body. Sensilla, we have mechanoreceptors and chemoreceptors. The mechanical or mechanoreceptors are going to be out pockets or structures that are coming off of their exoskeleton, such as mouth parts and antenna that can touch. Then you have the chemoreceptors, which are going to take in chemicals. So everything pretty well is an out pocket of their exoskeleton, but what information they gather depends upon what the structure does. Maybe it's a taster, maybe it's a touch. It picks up sensory information. And we know that many of the arthropods, especially the insects and the chelicerates like spiders and scorpions, use pheromones for communication. But they use chemicals that they secrete not just to find mates, but to find each other, to find trails. They don't talk. Some of them make sounds. Some of them dance. And we know that the sensory hairs called the setae stick up off their exoskeleton and pick up information from the environment in a variety of ways. Maybe it picks up air or movement around them, but some of them can also pick up chemicals through those little hairs on their body. So when you look at the hairs, good examples here. I know some of these pictures are frightening to some of you. You have arachnophobia. I'm very sorry. But you can see they're very hairy little creatures. And it allows them to know what's going on around them in case something's coming after them, like a fly swatter, for sure. You can see the nervous system here just in an insect. It's got a brain. It's not super big, but the body itself is not that large. And then they have the ganglia that move along here. And I think I incorrectly said a dorsal nerve cord. They have a dorsal blood vessel, but they have a ventral nerve cord that runs along the lower part of the body or the belly of the animal. But you can see all of these other out pockets coming from that nervous system to help them gather their information. They have compound eyes. We know our crustaceans have these, our insects have these, our arachnids have these. Some of the other chelicerates, such as your scorpions, are going to have pretty good eyes. But they're going to gather information about basic images. It's not going to be like what we see. Resolution is not good. Most of them do see color. They might detect the light, but there's lots of different lenses built into these compound eyes that give them pretty well 360-degree input for vision. There's simple eyes at least on the insects. I believe spiders might have these as well, but it varies from one type of insect to another. They might have one simple eye, maybe right in the middle, like this grasshopper, or they may have three simple eyes to gather as much information as they can. And this mostly detects changes in light. So when you're trying to catch one of these critters out running around in your yard, they can see you. They can see the movement. They can see the change in shadows and lights, and they're going to hop out of the way. Hearing? Your hearing is different from ours. They do have tympanums, very much like the reptiles or amphibians, except they're not necessarily located on their head. They're somewhere on their body to pick up sound waves, vibrations coming at them through the air, through the ground. And it is a stretched membrane, just like a drum. It's going to channel that sound into their brain so they can get out of the way and respond to whatever's going on. Or maybe it's a mating dance, as in the peacock spiders. So it can be located anywhere on the body, including the thorax, maybe the abdomen, even the legs. So notice the tympanums can be in various spots on different species of arthropods. Movement, we talked about the exoskeleton already. Not only is it protective, but it's used for muscle attachment. in comparison to our muscle attachment, where we can see that they're attached to the bones internally. Here's our internal skeleton. This exoskeleton has muscle attachments a little bit different than ours, but it still allows for very good movement of these organisms. Now, we talked about dioecious and monoecious earlier in the semester. A little review: if you're a dioecious organism, you have both male and female organisms of your species. A majority of our arthropods fall under that category, male and female. They mate, they lay eggs. Some do have live young, not that many. Some are also considered ovoviviparous. But we do have a few different species that are considered monoecious, where one organism has both male and female parts. Barnacles are examples of this. When we look at barnacles, they have a larval stage that can move, but the adults are considered sessile. My little bar is covering that up, meaning they don't move as adults. So the larval stage will, let's see if I can find barnacles. I guess we're going to talk about barnacles when I get to crustaceans. But the larval stage can move and the adult stage cannot, and that's why it has both male and female parts. All right, we've got some grasshopper sex here. Have to love that. If you look at their posterior ends, obviously a little bit different. When we look at morphology for breeding, they're going to have internal fertilization. Female's going to lay eggs, maybe in the ground. If it's a cricket, if it's a katydid, it's going to cut into leaves. If it's a cicada, it's going to cut into the branches of your trees and cause some tree death. All right, so now we come to our first subphylum that we're going to talk about in some detail, called Hexapoda. Hexa means 6, pod means foot. It does have 6 legs, and you can see a perfect example of a hexapod is a grasshopper right here. You can see they have antennae. You can see their compound eyes. We talked about simple eyes. Grasshoppers even have wings. They're going to have mouth parts that are going to be chewing on vegetation, but it's going to vary from one insect to another on their body, what they have. That we have predators like the dragonfly that are going to hunt in the water, and then they're going to be hunters of the sky. Many of our helicopters, they've tried to design after because of the way they can maneuver in the air, backwards, forwards, up, down, and so on. Some of them have ways for collecting pollen. They have little pouches on their legs. Some of them can jump like the flea. Some can walk on water. Many of them can fly long distances, like our butterflies that migrate to Mexico, which will be coming back here very soon. In fact, I saw my first hummingbird yesterday at my feeder. And flies are fantastic flyers. They have these balancing organs on their wings called halteres. So appendages and structures that they have, their special adaptations are phenomenal when we look at the insects. They're very well prepared for the life that they're living. Now, if we were in the lab, we get to see lots of different ones. But I want you to be going outside. I want you to be looking for insects. It doesn't mean you have to grab them. Be careful if you're allergic to bees. But take a look at mouth parts if you can. Take a look at the legs. Take a look at the wings. That they have the structures they have for what they're eating, whether they're a butterfly and they have a proboscis that sucks up pollen, or they're an insect like a fly that's going to spit out digestive enzymes on your food and then suck up the digested food, or maybe it's like a mosquito that's going to bite you and the mosquitoes are out. Now, for sure, another one of those zoonotic disease carriers. And then we have our plant eaters that get into your garden or eat your grass, like your grasshoppers and your crickets. So when we look at the insects, revisit this subphylum, they have 3 body parts. They have the head, thorax, and the abdomen. Digestion, it's complete. We've discussed this already. They pretty well have just about everything we have. They have the mouth, they have the esophagus and pharynx, which the food moves through. They do have a crop and a gizzard, very much like either earthworms or birds for grinding up their food. And then they have something that's going to absorb the excess water before it moves out of the body, very much like our large intestine. They're going to breathe through spiracles like all insects do. They have tracheal tubes to move the gases, CO2 and oxygen. And if you're an aquatic insect, you're going to be in the water breathing with what we call tracheal gills. those spiracles, having holes on the side of your body are not going to be a great idea if you're in the water. Some of them, even like our beetles, will carry a bubble over their body with air in it for breathing underwater. It's kind of like carrying their own submersible um, device with them. Circulation, very much like everything we've talked about already. We already mentioned excretion for insects, and we know that hormones are going to regulate just about everything that they do, from metamorphosis to migration to molting, and to growth, eating and growing and eating and growing and eating and growing. And then finding mates, eating hormones are going to work with that too. So you can pause it right here and fill out some of the characteristics on your table for insects. You can even go back to your notes as needed and look them up without this lecture. Okay, so we've talked about hearing in our insects. We've talked about the eyes and the nervous system with our insects. And some of them have good enough sensory input, you could say, to even get away from bats. When we were discussing mammals, we talked about echolocation of bats. But some of the moths are able to evade the bats flying after them. They have chemical receptors to taste things. Butterflies, for example, taste with their feet. Most people don't know that. They land on you, they're touching you with their feet. They're probably tasting salt on your skin, believe it or not. Talked about setae already with vibrations that most arthropods have, even aquatic arthropods. You get a lobster and you look at the claw, there's little sensory hairs found on the claw to help them know what they're touching or they're grabbing. Good examples of antennae that vary from one insect to another. And when we look at reproduction, normally they are dioecious and they lay eggs. Parthenogenesis is where the females can reproduce alone, and those are in Hemiptera and Hymenoptera, which tend to be our true bugs, like your stink bugs if you have any in your house. And your Hymenoptera are your wasps and your bees and your ants and your termites. All right, we have moths that communicate using pheromones. We have things such as fireflies that use flashes. And I've got a case study that we're going to look at with fireflies coming up later on. It's pretty cool to see not only how fireflies use light flashes to communicate, but sometimes that courtship behavior can be the death of many species, because there's predatory species that flash in order to capture some of the others and eat them. All right, let's talk about metamorphosis. Pretty important, and I want you paying attention outside. If you get to spend some time outside, take a look at caterpillars, little worms. I got some little worms that have been falling from the trees all over my patio. They're pretty well done. I think they came down during the rain. But we have larvae that are produced when we look at complete metamorphosis. You have the egg, the larva, which goes through usually a series of 5 instars. Eat, grow, molt. Eat, grow, molt. Does it 5 times. Once it gets to the size it's supposed to be, it's going to go through the metamorphosis stage, and pupa is an intermediate where there's a complete body plan change. And then after a while you have the adult that's going to emerge. Flies do this, our butterflies do this, moths do this, beetles also go through complete metamorphosis, and it does help reduce competition. This is on your study guide. It reduces competition normally, not only for food, but for habitat. They're going to live in different areas, and it allows both to coexist at the same time, adult and the larval stages. When we look at incomplete metamorphosis, we go through 3 stages. The egg, the nymph, which is about a miniature version of the adult, and it grows and it changes slightly and becomes the adult. They do tend to eat the same food. Grasshoppers, crickets go through this. Dragonfly, they call them nymphs as well, even though they look more like larvae and they live in the water. But it's called incomplete metamorphosis. Here's another example of incomplete metamorphosis. Bed bugs here, yum, gotta love that. They suck blood from their hosts. But you can see it's incomplete metamorphosis. There's no wormy or larval stage. And then you have the praying mantises here. They all hatch out in their little bitty, tiny little miniature praying mantids, and they're very beneficial. Okay, so when we're looking at arthropods and insects, we know that they can cause some problems.